Welcome back to George on Sports with myself, your host, George Egator. Now, today we have on the show Cameron Hogwood, Sky Sports journalist. How are you, my friend? And welcome to the show.
I'm very good. Thank you for having me. It's good to chat football after what's been a crazy week.
Yeah, and actually you've just segued us nicely into some of the first talking points. We have had trade after trade after trade in what feels like, one of the most exciting parts of the NFL year, so to speak. And I know we've got things like the draft coming up, but breaking news, Khalil Mack has found himself back into the AFC West. The AFC West in itself is one of probably the most loaded division in the NFL. But if we touch on Khalil Mack's trade, so he's been traded by the Bears to the LA Chargers, and obviously we know Joey Bosa is on one side of the D-line, and now we're going to have Khalil Mack on the other side. The Chicago Bears receive a 2022 second-round pick and a sixth-round pick next year. Khalil Mack himself, although he has had a bit of a down year because he had an injury. I think he had a foot injury, which kept him out for quite a while. But he has racked up 36 sacks in 4 seasons with the Bears, and that includes 3 Pro Bowl selections, 2 All-Pro honors, and a runner-up finishing for Defensive Player of the Year voting in 2018. All of the Chargers take on all of Mack's current and remaining salary too, which is 3 years, $63.9 million. And I think it's key here because Chargers had one of the biggest cap spaces in the league, so they could afford to do this essentially. And I think one of the key things for the Chargers here is we've seen it time and time again throughout last season. They struggled to maintain the run. They struggled to stop the run. I mean, people were running all over them. But now you pair Joey Bosa with someone like Khalil Mack, who is a run stopper. The AFC West has just absolutely exploded. And for me, I think it's great for the Chargers. It boosts their defense. You obviously guys like 33, Derwin James, who is a ball hawk back there as well. And obviously, we know the Chargers narrowly missed out on the playoffs. They should have been in there with a talent like Justin Herbert, but now they've reinforced their defense and they've extended Mike Williams, as we know. I think it's a $60 million deal. It's all go for the Chargers. It's all go.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest point of this for me is that they're going all in on Justin Herbert's rookie deal, which is the way to do it. Look, they've kind of seen they found their quarterback, and now's the time to support him, and they've done that. And kind of when we look at the Khalil Mack deal, I kind of said similar about Von Miller when he went to the Rams last year, where you think, look, you're maybe not getting 100% Von Miller Hall of Famer, but if you get anywhere near to 75% from him, it makes a huge difference, especially when you put him across from someone like Aaron Donald. Similar, looking at LA, Khalil Mack across from Joe Bosa is pretty frightening for an offensive line. And Russell Wilson walks into that division now thinking, I've been running for my life over in the NFC, and now I'm doing it again. So it kind of throws everything. Sorry to kind of move on to that Wilson deal because of it, but that offensive line, Wilson deal is not going to work unless they protect him because of, look at that defensive talent and that division now, the pass rush duos. I mean, Yannick Ngakoue and Max Crosby for Las Vegas Raiders. People aren't talking about them enough. And just a good deal for the Chargers. I still think they could do with another interior guy. I think I love Jordan Davis in the draft. I think if he fell to them, that is some front line.
Freakish athlete.
Yeah, just incredible athlete. And like if you get anywhere close to 75% of Khalil Mack, what he can do, it's going to improve that defense. And that's what they need.
Do you think the Chargers have, you mentioned obviously someone like Jordan Davis, who we saw at the Combine, were putting up ridiculous numbers for his size. Do you think now that they have Khalil Mack and potentially will look to draft someone in the league, do you think they have what they need to be able to make a deep playoff run?
I do, yeah, I do. I think I agree with you. I think they should have made it last year. I don't know how they didn't in the end. Just coaching, play calls didn't work out for me in the end. A few decisions down the stretch didn't quite pay off. But I do think they've got so much talent, too much talent not to make the playoffs. I think the only reservation you'd have about that is that you look at the strength of the conference in the division. It's so hard to get out of these days. And but that is why I guess you have to load up. And I do expect them to make the playoffs this year.
Yeah, it's almost like we're seeing a reaction to every trade, especially in the AFC West in itself. I mean, Wilson decides he's going to go over to Broncos, and all of a sudden, Max Crosby's extended, and now the Chargers have Khalil Mack. But on the topic of trades, we also have another trade. So 3 years ago to the month, the Browns brought in who they thought was their man in OBJ to support Baker. Now we've seen how that went. currently Baker is, kind of injured, and he is the talk of the town in terms of, is he the guy to go forward? Meanwhile, guys like OBJ, who kind of was pictured as the villain, sits with a ring and a new baby. Now the Browns trade for wide receiver Amari Cooper from the Dallas Cowboys. The Cowboys will receive the 2022 fifth-round pick, and the teams will also swap 2022 sixth-round picks. And this is quite interesting because I have seen quite a lot of uproar amongst players with regards to the terms of the trade. And the talk of the town is someone like Amari Cooper, who we know is one of the best route runners in the entire league. And yeah, he may have fallen off a little bit, but a number of players are questioning why he's only worth that, essentially. But in addition to that, the Browns' their current receiving crop isn't necessarily great. They've got Donovan Peoples-Jones, Jarvis Landry, who's actually been given permission to seek a trade. So it seems like it's, it's all shake up on the wide receiver front. And you've also got guys like Rashard Higgins. So my question to you, Cameron, is we know OBJ wasn't the issue, as much as people wanted to paint that out and the media wanted to paint that out, and OBJ Senior had to, pull his son pretty much out of hell and plug him into, the spotlight, and now he has a ring. How much does this trade help Baker? And how good is this for Amari Cooper?
I'm with you. I agree. I think it was a bit of a daylight robbery where they got getting the way they got Amari Cooper, who I think is still criminally underrated for me. He improves their offense immediately, regardless of who you have around him. I think they did, when they brought OBJ in, it was the right move. They needed a kind of like first-class A-chip receiver to kind of ignite this offense. And we know it's a run-first offense, so maybe OBJ didn't expect kind of to that extent it would be that much. Amari Cooper comes from a Cowboys offense that kind of runs through Zeke Elliott at times, so he's kind of used to it. But I do think he immediately improves that team. He's a, like you say, exceptional route runner. People question his work ethic wrongly. I think you only have to look at him on the field, and it's ridiculous if you question him like that. And I think you only have to look at which coaches have questioned that in the past to know that it's not true. But yeah, I do think the Browns are a funny one, because you talk about Jarvis Landry going, big locker room guy, and I know locker room guys aren't going to win you a championship, but you bring in Amari Cooper, lose Jarvis Landry, and you're kind of looking at that receiver corps and thinking, what's he going to look like? Yeah. But then, of course, you remember Nick Chubb, it kind of runs through him. I do think it helps Baker. The route running, exceptional route running is what he needed. But yeah, it's a funny one. You never know with the Browns till they start on day one and you can see what happens. But I do like the deal. I think I agree with you. A theft in terms of how they got him. But yeah, I'm
so shocked. But for me, I'm seeing a theme that, and Browns fans can I'm sure agree. A couple of things. So it seems like the issue with the Cleveland Browns always comes down to personalities and locker rooms, locker room behavior. I mean, we look at Baker from the start. Baker himself was, he was a huge name. He was almost like a god in college, and he's come into the NFL and he's doing commercial after commercial after commercial. And we know he's obviously, he broke the Bears playoff drought, and the Cleveland Browns unlocked all the beer fridges in the city, and everybody went crazy, and everybody was, Baker is the guy. And you bring in someone like OBJ, who, for many different reasons, kind of didn't he didn't do so well towards the end of his career with the Giants, and you come over to the Browns for a new lease of life, and again that kind of goes downhill. And it just seems like there's always this stigma with the Browns that it's to do with personalities and locker room behaviors and locker room guys. You mentioned Jarvis Landry. He is a huge locker room guy. He has, people would have seen it on, I believe, I don't know how many years ago it was, but Hard Knocks, where Jarvis Landry was essentially telling his wide receivers to man up. If you're hurt, you're hurt. Otherwise, you get out on that field and you're playing, because we are a team, and that's how we perform as a team together. He leaves the locker room. He leaves the club. He leaves behind leadership, culture, passion, everything that you look for in a leader. You don't have OBJ, and you do bring in Amari Cooper. I don't know. For me, I don't know if this fixes the Browns' issues. I really don't. I know they're a run-first team with Chubb, and they've obviously got Hunt, and they've also got I forget his name, the Deonis Johnson as well, who's great. But for me, I think the issue starts and ends with Baker. OBJ is a great athlete, and we saw what he did with the Rams, and he has a Super Bowl ring. If he wasn't able to find OBJ, I don't know how people think it's going to be so different with a guy like Amari Cooper. And that's no shade on Amari Cooper, because he clearly is great. But just for me, I think the Browns, their issues, a lot of it comes from, but in my opinion anyway, and we know they've had organizational issues and top-down culture issues, but it's great for Cooper. I just don't see how the Browns turn things around with this trade. It may be the start, but for me, it's a tricky one, and it's more than just Cooper. Do you see? I mean, just to end with Baker, do you see him as a guy moving forward?
I think this year will be defining, I guess. I feel like the Cooper kind of deal strikes to me as they were so close to getting it right, and we saw them make the playoffs, and it looked like such a great team. Injuries haven't helped. I hate to throw injuries in, but it happens. Yep. You have to overcome injuries. But I feel like they were so close, and I wonder about the Jarvis Landry thing. Who went to who first in terms of leaving? And I wouldn't be surprised if Jarvis Landry was kind of the one that was keen on looking elsewhere before the Browns pulled the trigger. But like I said, like they were so close, and this is a chance to kind of almost reset that receiver corps. We know he has a great relationship with Rashad Higgins and Donovan People-Jones, but yeah, it's really hard to call the Browns. Yeah. I do like the look of that offense, but Baker was a little bit too inconsistent for me last year, and I still do think there's a player in there. Look at him on those bootleg runs, where he thrives. He's exceptional, and outside the pocket, he's still a great player. But it's that consistency and still kind of finding his feet and stamping his mark on his offense, where we know there were bigger personalities than him, and maybe that overshadowed him a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we're at the part of the show where I don't know how to feel. We're going to talk about my Colts. So we know what comes with that. Carson Wentz, the name that has been thrown about the league for a number of years now. I mean, he's no stranger to being traded with the Eagles and obviously coming over to the Colts, and now traded to the Washington Commanders. Now, the first thing I will say is I have a lot of respect for Chris Ballard and Frank Reich. I love them as a pairing. I think they're amazing. I did begin to question their direction in terms of, I know Ballard he's a guy that doesn't like to splash out. He doesn't like to overpay anybody. He likes to keep things fine financially, and he likes to, get right value for the trades that he does do. But Frank Reich obviously put his neck on the line here, wanting to bring over Carson Wentz, thinking he could, reignite the reunion that they both had at Philadelphia Eagles. And I was for it. They swayed me over in the end. And to be fair to Carson Wentz, he wasn't awful. He wasn't awful. He made some great plays. He won us some great games. He also threw away some games too. References the Jags there. But I think the way our season ended, and Jim Irsay, the owner, I mean, he has been cryptic tweeting for days and days and days immediately after our exit, leading to everybody to think, we're going to let go of Carson Wentz. And the reason why I bring that up is because I think the Colts have done extremely well to get what they got from this trade, bearing in mind every single person in the league knew that Wentz was out, and we still managed to trade him to the Washington Commanders, and we received a 2022 second-round pick. I believe we swapped positions in the draft. A third next year and a conditional third in 2023, which can become a second based on if Wentz plays a certain number. I believe it's 70% of snaps. Now, if you recall, we had the same type of trade deal with the Eagles based on the level of Carson Wentz play, and that ended up turning into a first-round pick for the Eagles. So that is a huge loss for us. Bearing in mind, we've obviously now let go of Wentz. So credit to Ballard, and obviously they know what they were doing, and they've managed to bring something in as opposed to just letting him go for nothing, and they knew they wanted to move on. So that leaves me to ask you, and ask myself even, the Colts, where do we go from here? The good thing about this deal is it leaves us with now the most cap space in the league at just under 70 million, which is a great deal of money. We do have guys to pay, and we do have other positions we need to fill. We need an edge rusher. We don't have an edge rusher. I mean, Quitty Pay is going to come on strong, but he's obviously didn't have the year we thought he was going to have. We need a receiver. We need a big-bodied receiver. T.Y. Hilton is likely to retire, although he is just shy of 10,000 yards as a Colt, so we may see him come back. Our run game is, it speaks for itself. We have the best running back in the game. We have Jack Doyle, our tight end, who is retired. We're looking to bring back Mo Cox, so we need to sign another tight end, and there is news about us looking at Evan Engram. But the key position that we need to fill is quarterback, and there are a number of guys that have been thrown around, and some of them I'm for, some of them I'm not. The first two I mentioned is Jimmy Garoppolo, 49ers quarterback. We've seen what he's done with them before. Yes, he can make some Wentz-like plays. But essentially, he's one of the guys that the media reporting that Colts should go and target. My issue with this is he's about to have shoulder surgery and won't be able to throw until July, I believe. So that leaves, a very fine time between rehabbing your shoulder and being on the field. Then there's Derek Carr, obviously an AFC West quarterback who, quite frankly, I think is a little bit underrated. He didn't have Henry Ruggs last year. Darren Waller was injured for quite a lot of the year. Brian Edwards was a no-show. And obviously Deshaun Jackson was, the deep threat, limited deep threat ability. So if you plug someone like Derek Carr into the Colts with the run game and you bolster the attack with a few extra weapons, I think we could be looking like a dangerous team. There leaves one name, and I think you know where I'm going with this one, and that is Deshaun Watson. And I mentioned his name because he was cleared of the latest allegations or the latest charges that he was facing a few days ago. Now, I believe he still faces 22 civil suits. I'm not sure where that's going to go, but it's looking likely that he will be cleared to play. I mentioned the cap space earlier. He is someone that I would love us to go after, and I don't know how it would work, how we would offer him the deal, because obviously we need to fill other positions. But I want to know what you think. What do you think about where the Colts should go at the quarterback position?
I think the decision to let Wentz go after 1 year tells me they have something in mind. That is what my immediate reaction. Whether that's Jimmy G, I'm not sure offers a whole lot more than what Carson Wentz did in that offense. I like Jimmy G, and he comes from a really good running scheme, which is obviously suits you down to the ground because that is the heart of your offense. I think you mentioned Jack Doyle was a really interesting one. I think people underrated how big a part he was in kind of implementing that scheme. You kind of look at him and Miley Cox. They played as many snaps as most receivers on that team, between kind of lining up those tight splits on the line of scrimmage and coming in as disguised blockers, line up as fullbacks, halfbacks. That they were so key, and that's a really big hole to fill. And that helps the quarterback as well, because that is one extra kind of body to impair the vision of the defense. I think Derek Carr's a long shot. I can't see Josh McDaniels letting him go. Yeah, I can't.
Oh, wow.
I just struggle to see it happening. I don't think Josh McDaniels would have gone there if he'd have thought Derek Carr would have gone, because like you said, there aren't a whole lot of options elsewhere outside of. That's why we saw the Broncos scramble to get Russell Wilson so quickly, because there's not a lot of options. Deshaun Watson, it's still such a murky situation to me that there's a possible suspension coming. We don't know. The NFL investigation is still going on. Like you say, still facing 22 civil lawsuits, which that's still a long way to go in the process. And I hate to bring it up, but what kind of PR move is bringing in Deshaun Watson? Who wants to? I know we've seen NFL teams, they don't really care.
Time and time again.
They don't. We've seen that, and it's a bad thing, but it happens. But on the surface, you can't deny Deshaun Watson, if he comes back into the league, is a top 10 quarterback straight away.
Yeah.
But you don't want to talk about it because there's so much we don't know. But which is the same with a lot of cases in the NFL. But for me, I'm kind of reserved talking about Deshaun Watson coming back until we know exactly what's going to happen. And that suspension, I think you're in such a position to win now. That suspension is such a killer if he comes in, can't play, and then you're kind of wasting half a season. But I do like what Chris Ballard's done. I like the fact that he's decided after 1 year, right, Wentz can get it done. Now we're going to go on to the next. What can we do next? Because we're in this window, we've got to make the most of it. Yeah. It is kind of those veterans. You're kind of losing a few key veterans at the moment. Michael Pittman Jr. will come up. I think he'll be your number one receiver by a mile this season. And Kwity Paye, I think, will come along. And I like your secondary. I think you're settled in the secondary. I think that's a really good unit. But it's just that quarterback position, and it's kind of fallen in a really unlucky year where there's not a lot of options. And do you kind of chance your arm in this draft where nobody's quite keen on the quarterbacks? But I don't know. Yeah,
it's a tricky one, because I'm as a fan, I'm a bit reserved in the sense that I want us to go for it now. Purely because when I'm seeing guys like Darius Leonard tweet about his frustration about having the Colts having a fifth quarterback in their fifth season, a fifth different quarterback, it leads me to start thinking, are players starting to get disgruntled? Are they looking to go elsewhere if we don't get this right? And I don't, like you say, we have the team now. We have the best running back in the league without question. Obviously, we can talk about Derrick Henry, but we are in win mode, and it has to be. I don't think we can afford to wait for the next crop, albeit the next crop of quarterbacks look great, but the way it's going, we can't go into next season. I mean, let's say we go for it, or if we stick with our hang on, I forgot his name. Sorry, our current quarterback that we drafted. If it's a case where we stick with him and then we not tank, but we wait for the next crop of quarterbacks, I just don't want to disrupt the squad. I don't want to disrupt the harmony, the culture. Yeah. So for me, if it meant that we had to get Jimmy G, I think I'd probably take him. He's a bit of a sideways. Yeah, I think I want to say safe to a degree. His doctors have said he's going to make a full recovery and he should make some kind of training camp. So hopefully that's the case. I mean, personally, if putting Watson to the side in case things do turn sour with him, I would rather Carr. If not, I guess the bounce back would be Jimmy G. But I mean, we're in a good situation in the sense that we have a decent amount of cap space. So hopefully we can, we can make it work.
I wanted to ask you, like, the Colts reportedly loved Jordan Love heading into the draft a couple of years ago, sorry. And what do you think? Would you take Jordan Love now? It's a bit of a risky one because you don't know what you're getting.
This is the problem. So I've had this discussion with a few other people and some other Colts fans. The issue is we hardly saw him play, and he's not going to play when he sits under someone like Aaron Rodgers, who is just, we're going to come to him later, just made an extension. It's a really, really tricky one because the Colts did like him. You're right. And he does present, and he's a scramble quarterback. He can run, he can make the moves, he can make the passes, but where he's such an unknown entity, you can kind of compare him to Trey Lance, except Trey Lance has played a bit more at least, and he is going to be the starter of the 49ers. I'm sure we can say that. But Jordan Love it's a shot in the dark, and if it's a case of people were talking about a 1-year deal to see if he can do it or not, some people were thinking we should bring him in for the long term because I think he's 23, he's young, and I'm not sold. To be honest, I think a lot of the people in the league, and I'm seeing quotes from all different kinds of analysts and management, are speaking of, if I can go and get someone who's proven and experienced and can do it, that's what I'm going to do. I don't want to have to wait and see with Jordan Love or draft someone who potentially might not have the goods. If I know I can go and get Derek Carr, I know what he can do, then I'm going to get him. And that seems like the way the league is moving slightly with these trades. And on that note, that brings me to Russell Wilson. I mean, I keep talking about the AFC West, but I just can't stop myself from speaking about the AFC West. Russell Wilson has now gone over to the Denver Broncos. When the whole organization were pretty sure that nobody was going anywhere, and lo and behold, off he goes. In a deal that includes Noah Fant, tight end for the Denver Broncos, defensive lineman Shelby Harris, and quarterback Drew Lock, who could now go over to Seattle, as well as 2 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks, and a 2022 fifth-round pick for Wilson, in exchange for a 22 fourth-round pick. So my initial reaction was, wow, the Colts definitely won't have him now because he's obviously gone over to the Broncos. He obviously had enough, and it was one of them. It was either going to be Pete was going to go, or Russell, and it seems like it's Russell. You plug him into the Broncos with, again, I call them one of the better running back combos in Javonte Williams and Melvin Gordon. That's providing Gordon stays. Then you have guys like Tim Patrick, Jerry Jeudy, who I think will see a revival of his career. Cortland Sutton, they've got a strong defense, young up-and-coming defense. I think the Broncos are in a great position here. I can't say the same for Seattle. It's all changed, but the Broncos are looking good.
Yeah, I think the big part of that deal for me is, how does he work with Nathaniel Hackett, who comes over from the Packers? And we don't know how big a part he played in that Packers offense, but we know Aaron Rodgers loved him, which is kind of good enough for me to know that he's a good offensive mind. But you throw Russell Wilson into that offense, like we mentioned earlier, that offensive line gave up 40 sacks last year. That is key. They need to go out now. You get Wilson, go out in free agency, get a good tackle, just protect Wilson at all costs. Javonte Williams in the backfield is huge because it forces defense to fill that box. It sets up that play action for Wilson, and it sets up that deep shot that he loves. The one kind of reservation is, we know Wilson doesn't like pepper in the middle of the field. It's he likes throwing outside the numbers. That's what he tries to set up with kind of those kind of play action, those bootlegs, getting outside the pocket, kind of these hero ball plays. But it's just I was the same as you. I expected one of them to go. I was surprised it was Russell Wilson in the end, because you look at a 71-year-old Pete Carroll, and not to be ageist at all, but you're wondering what the kind of the situation is. I kind of wrote in a piece over the weekend I wonder if they've looked at their situation in a division and thought, we've got 2 years left of Russell Wilson on his contract. Realistically, can we win another Super Bowl? Probably not. And to add to that, the Jamal Adams trade, they lost 2 first
Oh
rounders.
God, yeah,
That almost derailed any kind of rebuild they needed to do. And with the trade for Wilson, they get back 2 first rounders, which at least gives them a few more options, gives them a little bit more stability in terms of that rebuild that was always going to come. When I saw the news, I was a bit sympathetic for Tyler Lockett, who is kind of people don't talk about enough that he often made some of those hero ball plays with ridiculous catches and kind of those secondary routes. And yeah, I do feel for that guy in DK Metcalf. But the Seahawks are an interesting one now. Drew Lock, I think, will prove nothing more than a bridge to what their next option will be. I wouldn't be against them. I think they have the number 9 pick now that they got from the Broncos for this year.
Yeah,
I wouldn't be against them pulling the trigger on a quarterback and saying, why wait? Why kick the can down the road? Let's just try and do something now and stay competitive, and then it'll set us up for next year that we might be in a good position to kind of lure a few more players here. But Wilson, in the kind of the overriding feeling is that AFC is ridiculous now.
I know, honestly.
Look at the NFC. Aaron Rodgers must be laughing because he's thinking, who is my next nearest rival? The 49ers and the Rams. And then probably the next best quarterback is maybe Kirk Cousins or Dak Prescott. And he's feeling good about life that he stayed.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's well played to the Broncos, because it's a huge. I mean, yes, it's a lot to give away, but again, it's on the theme of we want to win now. I mean, you can look at the trade that the Rams did with the Lions, and it kind of echoes a little bit of that in terms of they're going for the veteran guy, the prove it guy who's done it before, and he's got the weapons on the Broncos side of the field. So the AFC West, man, I can't wait for the season to start. But on that note, it brings us to the last point of the show, the main man who needs no introduction, Aaron Rodgers. So after all the drama, all the offseason, holding out of some camp, appearing on Pat McAfee shows, having his toes in the camera, changing his profile picture, and, being immunized and not vaccinated, catching COVID, talking about cancel culture and everything else, Aaron Rodgers is staying put with the Green Bay Packers. And quite frankly, I think it's the right move. I mean, I did anticipate him moving because of all the hype, but it is Aaron Rodgers, and he can be a bit diva-ish. There was a lot of talk about him trying to manipulate his price. And in reference to that, it was initially reported that it was a $200 million deal with $153 million guaranteed. He later came out and said that's incorrect. I haven't the actual terms of the deal aren't released yet, but I will be staying for another 4 years. Aaron Rodgers, I mean, some fans are saying he was never going to go anywhere. UK fans are loving it because now it means we're going to see him in London at one of the international games. And he's here for the next 4 years. Devontae Adams has been franchise tagged. I mean, I guess we kind of saw that coming. However, I do have one thing that kind of rocks a boat here. When you pay a guy like that kind of money, again, the terms of it's probably going to be around $50 million a year, something around that. We don't necessarily know, but it'll be a lot of guaranteed money. You are going to have to let some guys go because you have to afford Aaron Rodgers. And if it means Jay Alexander, you kind of have to keep. Smith, you also have to keep. There will be some guys, more than likely receivers in, MVS, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, maybe even Alan Lazard or Equinemius St. Brown. Guys are going to have to go somewhere because in order to keep Rodgers happy and pay him that money, you have to find the money from somewhere.
Yeah, that is the kind of asterisk and the point that you always have to remember about a deal like that. I just think you mentioned the numbers there and that he comes back for 4 years. Now you really have to go and win something. Now you have to. You've spoken about this for so long now and spoken about getting all these players around you. The players are there. I hate people that moan about Rodgers hasn't had enough players around him. You've had maybe the best receiver in the game for the last two or 3 years, kind of at your beck and call. Whenever you want him, he's there. And good support acts. Alan Lazard, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, good deep threats. Aaron Jones, they had Jamal Williams the year before last, who was him and Aaron Jones, one of the best running back duos in the league, and one of the best offensive lines. So, and you look at that defense, it come on leaps and bounds last year. The only thing that let them down was the special teams, and then that game against the 49ers where they couldn't get over the line, and Rodgers didn't play well. So I think I expected him to come back. I always thought that would be the case, just because I looked around and thought this is probably still his best chance to win. obviously Wilson goes to the Broncos, and it's an excellent team waiting for him there and a good receiver corps. But the strength of the division is so tough to get out, and Rodgers will look around and think, I haven't got a whole lot to compete with here. But it's just, go and win something now. You've done the talking, and it's time to win.
It's, I guess you can kind of say boom or bust with a number of these trades. I mean, Rodgers, the Broncos, and someone's probably going to get in trouble. Cameron, before we let you go, as a Sky Sports journalist, could you sum up a day in a life, a typical working day for you, be it in season or now when there's so much breaking news coming out? What does a day look like for you?
Yeah, so at the moment, we'll head in. It depends, shift patterns are a bit funny at the moment because there's obviously lots going on. We'll go in, we'll usually kind of have a team meeting, which we'll discuss kind of the latest news, what's happened overnight, what's to look forward to. We'll plan the content for the day. Any interviews we've done, we'll kind of flag and start writing up, really. It could be a case of a working day where you're covering breaking news, or you could be preparing a feature interview for upcoming games, say if either Sunday NFL is coming up. And then it'll usually, when NFL interviews come along, it'll be a case of me standing up to about 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning for these guys to wake up and then talking to them. And then, kind of as we get along with the week, start building your preview content for Sunday NFL. And then when it gets to Sunday, you're kind of locked in from about 3 o'clock, waiting for those games to come, getting ready, injury updates, anything that comes along, any news, scanning Ian Rappaport's Twitter non-stop for 2 hours. Not Adam Schefter, not too much Adam Schefter. And then we get our live blog going, where we kind of fill live updates for people who can't watch the games. We keep them up to date, kind of touchdown by touchdown, writing the reports at the same time. Gets to about 3 o'clock in the morning, and we'll kind of start right now wrap up column, which is kind of looking back on the best bits of people who might not have been able to watch. And then we do it all again the next week. But it's one of those things where you could get in one day and you're not quite sure what's going to happen. So I for instance, I was on the Brady shift when Brady supposedly retired the first time. I was the only one on who kind of knew about NFL. So thank God that I was on that. That was like, it was looking like a really quiet Saturday, nice quiet Saturday shift, and then suddenly that happens and all hell breaks loose. So that
quite literally.
Yeah.
Amazing. It's very fast paced, I'd imagine.
Yeah.
And where can people find some of your articles?
Yeah, I usually you can find me on Sky Sports. A lot of my work will be on Sky Sports. You'll just be able to find me, usually NFL stuff, some NBA stuff as well, a bit of tennis and other bits at the moment as well, boxing. On Twitter, I'm quite active on Twitter, so at @CH_Sky Sports. If you want to talk football, just message me. I'm always happy to engage with people. And if you want to read my work, that's where you can find me.
Highly advisable, guys. Cameron's work is top notch, especially if you follow the NFL, all the latest news. Cameron, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for coming on the show. And to everyone watching, stay tuned. We've got loads more episodes of loads more people coming soon. Keep it locked on Georgeonsports, and we'll see you soon.